How's everybody doing today? Good? Tired and cold. There's a lot of that going around. I'm asleep right now. I know exactly where you're coming from with that. Whew, yeah. I got up ridiculously early and still managed to get here about the same time. So I think next time I'm just going to sleep. It's ridiculous, you know? Whatever. Good news is the car started, so yay. Right? Made it here. And I'm not rubbing that in your face, Brian, because I know you're having Thunderbird problems. Yeah. No. The Thunderbird's not working. Yeah. Batteries to power. All right. So today we got some more fun stuff to talk about. And we're actually going to delve into some really cool tools that might help you with the models you're trying to build, some of the more complex details. We are going to delve into the dreaded Booleans. The Booleans, perhaps you've heard of them. There's a series of tools that can really help you out in some ways, and they're somewhat dangerous in other ways. And to be honest with you, sometimes there's a really difficult detail and they come in handy in terms of what you're trying to build. Most of the time, though, they're more dangerous than good. But the problem is quite a few people use them, but they don't use them properly. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how to use these Booleans in such a way that we're actually not creating catastrophically bad geometry using these tools. And to be honest with you, when we were talking about this as a department, what material we'd be teaching in the various classes, there were several instructors who were saying, no, don't even show them the Booleans. Don't even mention Booleans. Let's pretend they're not there. My theory on it is I would rather teach you how to use this stuff properly so that you can make smart decisions and either use it or not. But if you do use it, you use it right. Does that make sense? It's like, because if you pull open the drawer, right? You pull open the drawer in your kitchen, the first thing you guys are going to grab is the sharpest, pointiest thing you can find, right? That's your first choice, the knife. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to hold the knife, how to use the knife, how to hand the knife to someone else so that you know how to use it properly. But do please pay attention to the idea of using it properly. Does that make sense? That is the key. Booleans are very powerful tools, but they're a bit unwieldy, and they can create really bad geometry. So it's by no coincidence we're going to talk about happy, good-looking geometry first, and then we delve into the devil's playground. So just be ready when we get into those Booleans and we talk about their uses and using them smart in such a way that you're creating good geometry still, even though you're sort of flirting with danger when you use them. All right. All right, cool. Lecture 7. Polygon faces. We talk a lot about polygon faces. We talk about edges and edge flow. And these are all really important terms for you to know and understand on a number of different levels. Probably, again, we're going to talk about Booleans, so it's really important that we sort of revisit some of these ideas to make sure we understand why we're doing what we're doing. But one of the other things that you need to bear in mind when we're talking about the various terms that go with edge looping and that type of thing, it's really important for you to be able to use correct terminology for things when you're talking about your work, because often you will be asked to talk about your work to someone else, or someone will ask you a question and you need to speak to them, or they might have a question for you. And it's really important that when you're talking to them, you're using that kind of professional verbiage. It makes you sound much more like a professional, like you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about, and things, you don't just, so I did this, and that looked better. So point being, you're going to be interviewed based on your work, and people will ask you questions, and it's good that you have the right terminology to throw around. It just, again, overall makes you look like a more professional individual, and in an interview situation, it helps out tremendously. Now, the importance of quads in the edge flow. We can't really stress that enough, how important it is to have nice, neat, clean edge flow for your geometry. And what I want you to realize is just because we have to have nice edge flow, just because we're going for overall quadness for our polygons, that doesn't mean we can't build the things we want to build. It's just an added level of challenge. Does that make sense? It's a little harder, but that doesn't mean you can't make everything you want to make. So realize, organic or inorganic, it doesn't make any difference. We still have all the same goals when it comes to polygon modeling. Build the beautiful art, but make it mathematically sound so that we don't have problems in our pipeline. Be it tool use, be it saving, files crashing, rendering, issues during rendering and render crashes. All of these things can be salvaged as a result of using good quality geometry. So we're going to talk about the various shapes of faces from ideal to not so ideal, so you can get an idea of what is best. And again, in terms of quads, it doesn't mean that everything that's got four sides is a perfect square. You know, by no means does it have to be a perfect square. All of these shapes will work just fine in terms of its behavior on your models. And one thing that is definitely important with regard to quadding things and so forth is if your geometry changes shape at all, that's where you really start to see issues if your geometry is not quadded in the correct areas. And I don't mean it has to be organic, you know, that doesn't have to be a living being to change shape. You can have plastic materials, cords to things, you know, these are not organic entities per se, but they do change shape. And the issue you run into is if you don't have nice, happy, quadded faces, when that geometry changes shape, you tend to have issues with the lighting of the surface. Now, who can tell me the component of a polygon object that explains to Maya faces getting light or shadow? What component is that? The face normals. They tell us that, right? There's little indicators on each face. And what happens is when you've got a face and it's pointed towards the light, it receives light, so Maya says it's lit. Okay, highlight. When it's facing away from the light, okay, that gets shadow. So here's the problem. When you've got nice, happy squares and that geometry is changing shape, it bends really nicely and smoothly, and what you get is a gentle transition from lit to not lit. Does that make sense? When that geometry changes shape. If you have irregularly shaped faces, when those faces are changing shape, it'll snap from one position to another. So what'll happen is it'll say shadow, 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 pop. Oh no, I get light now. And what'll happen is on your geometry, what you'll see is what looks like flashing or popping because geometry is going from shadow to light instantly versus a gentle transition. Does that make sense? So again, the geometry just does not behave well when it's not quadded. And of course, you know, the other issues that we run into, tools not functioning properly, issues with bringing our geometry into other applications, which no likey, the stuff that's not four-sided. You know, you bring in bad geometry into ZBrush, that's not going to evaluate well at all. So again, in terms of many other processes, that's why we work so hard at making sure we've got good, happy geometry that is mathematically sound so we don't run into these issues. Now, sometimes we have to make a triangular shape in order to hit a certain detail that we're trying to build, but that doesn't mean that we can't have four sides, because these are four-sided entities even though they look like triangles. And the reason being, this vertice makes that two edges, not one. So that is a four-sided entity there. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, very important though to understand, that does not mean that you can just stick a vertice in the middle of something and then now it's, oh yeah, it's four-sided now. Which board do you guys see better, this one or this one? That's a trick question. All right, let's see. Where's my camera's right here. So we're going to go with this one. So what I'm saying is you can't just say, oh, I've got a triangle. I'm going to use my multi-cut tool. Boop, I can put a vertice in there. All right, four-sided. Because what happens is whatever face is right next to that is now no longer a four-sided face. And this is an unsupported vertice, which we talked about as a no-no. Does that make sense? So you can't just stick a vertice on there. But something you can do, so glad somebody left this mouse pad here. It makes a great eraser. Let me let me draw for you some groovy edge flow on a hypothetical piece of geometry. All right. Boop. Boop. All right. So let's say in my geometry I have a triangle. One triangle is hard to fix. It's very difficult. Incidentally, what tool do we love to use for fixing unquadrated geometry? Cleanup tool helps us find it, but multi-cut helps us fix it. Does that make sense? We use both of those. So I've located triangle. One triangle, kind of hard to fix that using the multi-cut tool. But what's nice about triangles is if you've got two of them, you can actually connect them to each other. So using the multi-cut tool, I can start here and go, and that leaves all of these as four-sided entities, and these are both four-sided entities as well. Does that make sense? So you can literally connect them to each other. So, if you've got a triangle, look for another one, because you can actually sort of terminate one into the other, and it totally fixes your geometry and makes it nice and happy again. And of course, everything around it's still four-sided. Does that make sense? Okay. So you can have triangles or triangular-looking geometry, but what we want to get away from whenever and wherever we can are sort of these very unusual shapes. You'll notice that one of the vertices is sort of interior to the face, and you end up with this sort of very sharp and pointy looking shaped face. These are obviously highly erratic in terms of their behavior. And we've already talked about non-planar, the idea that if the face is folded and there's not an edge there to support that, that's kind of a problem as well. Right? It's one of our non-manifolds. So want to stay away from that stuff as well. Now, with all of those rules, you might think, oh, I can't make an elaborate, detailed scene because everything's got to have four sides. Triangles have to be properly terminated. But the truth of the matter is, no matter how complex the scene is, you're just using these shapes to do it. It can totally be done. Just an added level of challenge, if you will. It's not just art. Make sense? Hell yeah? Okay. So again, you can make anything you want to, really. It's just a little bit harder. So let's talk a little bit about edge flow. Edge flow is kind of the structure or the support of the objects that you're building. And again, I talk a lot about edge flow being kind of like the girders of a building. You guys see buildings before they're completed? You see all the girders? That's sort of the structure or the framework of what that thing is going to look like. Well, edge flow on a piece of geometry is much the same kind of idea. It frames, it supports the shape and the form of the object, and that's why it's so important in terms of its behavior and how it affects everything. Now, something I'd like you to think about with geometry and edge flow. I like to talk about edge flow almost like the surface of water. When you create a droplet into water, at the point of impact, you get a great change in shape. But as you move away from that impact, you get smaller and smaller ripples, right? It just sort of eases its way back into the surface. Well, when you're modeling, it's much the same idea. You've got your edge flow that defines the object that you're building, but you're going to have details that are abrupt changes in shape, much like when that water hits the surface. But what you try to do is ease it back into the rest of the mesh, sort of have it gently transition back. Does that make sense? Abrupt upheaval, that's going to happen. But let's try to sort of feather it in so that it gently becomes part of the rest of the mesh while you're building. And again, it tends to have much better results all around with regard to your modeling. Now, in terms of some terms, some verbiage that you can utilize when you're talking about your geometry, we want to talk about edge flow and edge looping and the differences between those two. In terms of edge loop is the idea that you've created a series of edges that connect back to themselves. So you can literally follow it through the entirety of the model and connects back up onto itself. And that's an edge loop. Versus edge flow, which talks about the direction the edges move along the surface of the geometry. And they typically terminate or stop. But again, that's sort of the structure and the support of the object, the shape and the form. Does that make sense? The different, okay. I'm gonna make sure we're all on board with that. And the reason we're talking so much about edge looping and edge flow is because, lads and laddies, today we're going to be talking about booleans, the dreaded booleans that everybody's afraid of. And you've got to use them right or they'll sneak up on you and get your stuff. Booleans it's a very powerful tool, but like I said, you've got to be careful with them because they will create really, really bad geometry if you let them. They are reckless, reckless, reckless. Imagine a double-edged sword with a chainsaw attachment in the hand of an 8-year-old with too much sugar. While dual wielding lightsabers with their feet. Yeah, okay. So again, Booleans, yes, death everywhere is what you read from that. Now, the important thing for you to understand about Booleans is, yes, they're very powerful. Yes, they're very reckless, and we have to be careful with them. But realize that if you use these tools, there's sort of a responsibility that goes with them in terms of using them properly. And in terms of your grades in model creation, which is the class that follows this one, if you use Booleans and you don't use them properly, you will literally lose half of the points associated with that model when you turn it in. Does that make sense? Half. So this is why it's very important to use it properly, because that will come back to haunt you big time. Does that make sense? So just so that you're aware. All right. So the Booleans, again, very, very powerful, but risky. Oh, something to be aware of. Sometimes the order that you select things will actually determine the behavior of the Booleans. So just something to keep an eye out for when you're utilizing those guys. And I'm going to be drawing some more pictures right here, Brian. So I know you like to wield that expensive camera around. I know. You know what it is? I move around too much. But it's one of those things that makes it difficult for the snipers. If you move a lot, you know, because that stuff's heavy. I don't know if you've seen those guns, but those are massive. All right. So
it's okay. The digital friends remind me that you are in the void.
I am in the void. So Booleans, in terms of where the Booleans live, they're under mesh Booleans, and we're going to talk about the 3 different varieties of Booleans. And I will explain to you how it works. I'll show you an image example of how it works, and then of course, you know, we've got a super fun activity we're going to do together, so that you can kind of see how they go down. But let me give you this. Represents 2 spheres, just 2 pieces of geometry. Does that make sense? I'm going to use that for all 3 things that I'm explaining. All right, let's start with the Booleans union operation. Now, the Booleans union operation is basically taking 2 pieces of geometry, 2 totally separate entities, separate node for each one of these things, and it basically fuses them together. And fuse is the term. It literally fuses them together and reassigns it as a single thing at that point. And what you have to be aware of is that it actually removes the interior of both objects when it fuses them. Yes. Did you guys ever see The Fly, the movie The Fly? Okay, there's a really old one, and then there's one with Jeff Goldblum, which is pretty grim. Or Frankenstein. You guys ever see any of the Frankenstein movies? Those are movies about very unnatural things happening. Does that make sense? You find, digging up dead people and cutting off parts of their body and sewing them together to make one person. Not normal. Does that make sense? Booleans are not normal. It's a lot like that. Does that make sense? All right. So what I did here, let me show you over here. If I take two spheres and I use Boolean's union, what happens is Maya takes a look at the outside of both objects, and I'm pretty sure it uses the normals to figure this out, whether or not they're receiving light. I'm not 100% on that, but I'm guessing. But what it does is it looks at the two objects and it looks at what's on the outside, and then it completely removes what's on the inside. It just vanishes. All right, it's totally gone, and it fuses the two things together. So to give you an idea what that looks like, I took my Lego me, and I took a sphere and shoved it into my chest, did the Boolean's union operation, and it fused the sphere with my chest. The part of my chest that's covered by the sphere, gone. Totally gone. The part of the sphere that's inside my chest, gone. Vaporized. Does that make sense? It's trying to keep it hollow. Yeah, exactly, and that's the problem. You can see the edge flow. Does the edge flow on that sphere end up with four-sided out here on me? No, because Booleans do not care about edge flow. They don't care about quads. They don't care if your machine crashes every time you open this file. And I've had files do that. When I was using Booleans, it's freaking out. It just shut down on me. That happens. But again, that would be difficult to do, modeling. Does that make sense? Making that smooth curvature of that sphere on my chest. Make sense? Okay, so that's Boolean's union, which again, what's that?
Well, from just looking at that, it looks like you could be
It would be an adventure, I can tell you. But we're going to talk about how to be smart with it. That will follow. All right, let's look at Boolean's intersection. This is another fun little operation. Oh, yeah. Boolean's intersection. The way the intersection works is it basically takes a look at the two pieces of geometry, and it's the opposite of the union. It tries to find whatever's the outside, and that's what it gets rid of, and it keeps the inside. So when we talk about our two spheres, this is the outside of that sphere, this is the outside of that sphere, and this is the interior. So what it ends up doing is it wipes out the entire outside of both objects, and it just leaves the bit that's in the middle. So when you look at my Lego me, I did the same thing. I just took a sphere, stuck it in my chest, and I did the the intersection operation. And the part of the sphere that covered my chest, gone. The part of my chest that covered the sphere, gone. And it fused my chest with this sphere. And again, bad edge flow. I hit the shape, but the edge flow is bad. Does that make sense? You can see it's very quick. It does a lot of really cool stuff really fast. But what you're left with at the end, messy. Kind of like the idea that if you ask me to paint your house, I can take a bucket of paint and throw it at your house. And technically, I painted your house. But that's probably not what you wanted. Does that make sense? It kind of works like that. So just, again, it can be messy. So that one's, again, it hangs onto the inside and gets rid of the outside. All right. Ooh, That one looks a little bit like an eyeball. There we go. Okay. You're gonna love this one. The difference. In the difference operation, in the difference operation, the way I like to describe this one is you're using one piece of geometry to take a bite out of another one. Because you literally take a piece of geometry, stick it into another piece of geometry, and just chomp, eats it right out. So, for example, if I've got these two spheres and I use my difference operation, what will happen is I'll take this piece of geometry and it will literally, the whole thing will go away and it will take a bite out of the other piece and it leaves whatever's left behind. This, I'm gonna have to run that one, but I think it's the second one that goes away. Second one goes away. No, I think it's the first one that goes away. We'll find out. But so again, the difference, it removes it. So what happened is I stuck the sphere in my chest again, and I did the difference operation, and everything that was within that sphere, gone, just vaporized, right? But it did fuse the sphere with the interior of my chest. It didn't leave it open. It like cauterized it, you know? If you know what cauterized means. But anyway, again, it's like generating a black hole. You're using one piece of geometry to just utterly disintegrate another piece. Now, you know, where would you ever want to use one of these things? Well, let's say I'm trying to create complex smooth curvature and a shape change within a piece of geometry. This would be very difficult to achieve with a cube, creating this sort of, if I was trying to make a model like a piece of Swiss cheese, right? That would be really hard to do. Obviously, I'm left with bad geometry that I'm going to have to fix. And that's what we're going to talk about now. When it comes to working with Booleans, you really have two choices. You can either do the operations and then go back and fix what happens, or you can prep the geometry in advance. So we're going to take a look at do it first and then fix it after. So we got a bunch of exercises to help you with that. All right, you guys ready for some exercises? Let's do it. All the cool kids do. All right. Let me get Maya going here. Get all my tools and buttons back. All right, got to set my project to my activity file folder. And I'm going to open up the Booleans. Open up the Booleans operations. All right, now, in terms of the dreaded Booleans, I colored the geometry for you, not only because that makes it more fun, I don't know, it makes it more fun for me, but I wanted you to be able to see what's happening when you do the operations. Does that make sense? Because you'll see the colored pieces, you know, what exactly happened when I did it. So I've got these three guys here. They're exactly the same thing 3 times. What we're looking at is a cylinder 2/3 of the way put into a cube. So it's the same thing 3 times. All right, let's look at the first one. 2 pieces of geometry, and I want to use the Boolean's union operation. So all I have to do, excuse me, select one piece of geometry, hold Shift, select the second piece of geometry. Under Mesh, Boolean's union operation. Now, when you run that, here's what happens. Oh, yes. Here's before, here's after. Before, after. It's under Mesh. And what it does is it basically removes the part of the cylinder that was inside the cube. And if you go inside, you'll see that the part of the cube that was inside the cylinder is also gone, totally removed. And all it did was hung on to the outsides of both. Now, Maya did kind of try to connect it. You know, it's doing something in there. But you know that this is a catastrophically large N-gon that it left behind. So here's what I would have to do to fix that. All right. So then I would grab the insert edge loop tool, and I would need to drop some edges in here. Make sense? Now, who can tell me why the insert edge loop tool cut this face, and this face, but did not cut either of those? Doesn't work on N-gons, right? So it's not going to cut that. So what I end up having to do is drop in some insert edge loops to get those loops in there, and then go back with my multi-cut, and then I'm going to have to start connecting these things to each other. Does that make sense? I'd have to go back and fix it. All right? Not the most fun thing ever. And incidentally, in terms of its appearance, it typically doesn't look all that great either when you fix it. Does that make sense? You literally have to go back in there and repair the edge flow. All right, let's take a look at this one right next to it. This happy green and yellow fellow. In this one, I'm going to be using the intersection. And as I was saying, the intersection is sort of the opposite of the union, and meaning it saves whatever's on the inside of both. So if I select one, shift select the other, mesh booleans intersection, I run that tool, and let's see what that did. The part of the cylinder that was outside the cube, gone. The part of the cube that was outside the cylinder, gone. It just sort of nips them both off, and again fuses them together. And it leaves you with this cylinder. All right, and you can see the part of the cube that it saved, the part that was over the cylinder. And again, in terms of fixing that, you're going to have to get your multi-cut tool out and literally which incidentally, if you were curious, how do you quad a cylinder? You're looking at it. Does that make sense? So that fixes the top and leaves you with fours. Yes? Let's see. What if you were building the teapot and you were trying to get the handle to attach to the body of the teapot? That's one way you could do that. Does that make sense?
So like if you made the pot and the handle as two separate pieces, you could fuse them together using the boolean tool?
You could. And then you'd have to go back and fix it because it's going to give you really bad geometry. But these tools, like I said, there's some hard details and they might be helpful. Could you also just extrude properly and get that same thing? Yes, you could. So which do I do? But having more than one option, you can make some choices.
I mean, like what example would be like this specific Boolean one where like it removes everything on the outside and not the inside?
Let me think. What would you use that for specifically on something you're doing here? Well, you could use it to make the lens for the magnifying glass. You could definitely do that. You could use it for, because what you're talking about is two convex surfaces, which is somewhat challenging to build. So you might be able to utilize that by having two spheres to do it. Does that make sense? But again, some of these tools have very limited specialty use. Does that make sense? And that's why I don't show them right away. But if you do like a Google search for Booleans, you know, use of those tools, there's a billion people out there who are like, yeah, this is how you use them. You just take the shapes and then hit that and you're done. Love these things. Yeah, Maya doesn't. Nobody else on your team likes them, but it's good for you. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If I look at the bottom, what you will see is it maintained what we had going there. So what you would end up having to do ultimately is select those guys. Or I'm sorry, I want the edges. Get rid of them and then recut it to quad that. Does that make sense? It's a good question. But it's going to maintain the part of the cylinder the way it was originally created. All right? Yeah, no worries. So let's take a look at the third one. And this is the difference. And this is the wacky one where one piece of geometry takes a bite out of the other. And we will find out. I'm pretty sure it's the second one you choose is the one that takes the bite out. So in terms of this one, select a piece of geometry, shift, select the second piece. Cube is the second piece, mesh, Booleans, and we choose difference. And the cube, being the second piece, takes a bite out of the cylinder, and it literally just sort of cuts it off. Again, here's where it was. I selected the cube second. It just bites off the end of the cylinder. Exactly. And it's totally gone. But the inside of the cube that was inside the cylinder, we kept that, which we would then have to quad. But what if we select the cube first and then the cylinder? Mesh, Booleans, difference. Whoa. Now I've got that shape, which again would be kind of challenging to do. I did. I just changed the selection order. Yep, I grabbed the cube first and then the cylinder. And then the cylinder takes the bite out of the cube. All right, so again, that would be kind of a difficult shape to do on your own, but you could do that one pretty quickly with that crazy tool. All right, now the good news is we've got some more practice with these guys. So these three here, I'm just going to select and delete them. And you'll see there's another layer in here. Yeah, I just selected all those guys and deleted them. And here's what I'm going to show you. And this is all about how do I use those Booleans well? How can I use them in such a way that they're not going to make my life miserable? Let's say this is the shape I'm trying to create. I'm trying to get a cylinder out of a cube. Got a cube, got a cylinder. If we just use Booleans straight up, we get this. And then this is where we have to use our insert edge loop tool. We got to drop in our edges, try to match up the correct number, and then use our multi-cut and start connecting stuff. All right, this is what we did with the other version. Now, and that you can do it that way, but it tends to look a little bit messy. It's not quite as professional looking. has sort of a duct tape and bubble gum appearance to it to hold it together. But let's take a look at how to use Booleans a little bit smarter. Now, in terms of using Booleans and tools like that, I think it's very helpful to be able to see the edge flow. Excuse me, I got some bullfrogs in there today. It's very helpful for me to see the edge flow of the two pieces of geometry I'm working with. So what I like to do is I'll go to my shading menu and I will turn on wireframe on shaded. And what's nice about this display mode is I can actually see the geometry being shaded, but I can also see the edges on there. So it's kind of like edge mode and shaded mode at the same time. And why this is handy is because I can take a look at my two pieces of geometry and I can see where the problems are. This edge here marries up very nicely with this edge here. However, this edge here has no partner. Does that make sense? There's nowhere to connect it because there has to be the same number of edges on both. So what I'm going to do is take this piece of geometry and I'm just going to move it out of the way. And you'll notice that I froze it in place. That way when I move it, if I plug in all zeros, it's going to go right back to where it was. I don't have to worry about, do I have it in the right spot? Does that make sense? Another really good reason to freeze transformations periodically on your geometry. And what I'm going to do is just add some edge looping in there that will allow me to attach these two things. So I've got I get my multi-cut tool out, and I'm going to cut an edge loop in here, and then cut one over here. So now, when I bring this piece of geometry back in to where it's supposed to be, you can see that there's an edge attaching to an edge. So those are going to connect to each other. So if I select these two pieces of geometry, mesh Booleans union, nice and neat and clean. Does that make sense? It still looks professional. It's going to work. It's mathematically sound. All right, so the idea is I can prep my geometry in advance, or I can fix it after. It's really my call. Now, what we've determined is that when we've got two objects and we're trying to bring them together, two shapes, like, oh, I don't know, the ladybug antennas, if I've got 20 sides on my sphere, how many sides need to be on my cylinder? Same, 20, right? It's got to match because the edge is here. Because you might be wondering, well, if it's not lined up, let's say my two objects are not lined up perfectly, you know, will Maya fix it for me? The answer to that is no, Maya absolutely will not. It will joyously create thousands of n-gons with no problem whatsoever. It's not going to fix it for you. You have to make sure that this stuff lines up. So you want to have the same number of edges on both. So I can select this one, shift select that one, mesh Booleans union, and now they're fused together. But what you might have to ask yourself, and this is the critical thing about Booleans, is are Booleans the answer, or am I thinking about the problem wrong? Because I can do that same complex detail just using the extrude tool. Now I know you're thinking, well, wait a minute, I can't extrude a sphere out of a cylinder. That's really difficult. You're right. But you can extrude a cylinder out of a sphere super easy. Does that make sense? Yeah. Maybe you need to think about it differently the way you're approaching it. So what I can do, I'm going to make this same detail on the other side, but I'm not going to use Booleans at all. I'm going to grab the faces on the front of this object. Just let you see what I've got. Just grab those guys, right? Actually, I'm going to go one row bigger. All right. Grab those faces and do an extrusion. All right. Now, in terms of the extrusion, something I want to show you guys. When you pull out the geometry, sometimes you'll see the extrude tool do this. And you're like, what the heck is going on there? Well, what's happening is when you do the extrude tool is looking at the relative angle of the face, and it's extruding based on the angle of the face. So since those faces are curved, it's going to replicate that. Does that make sense? That's the axis it's going to extrude on. However, I can change the axis that I'm extruding on by switching from object space to world space. Because object space and world space exist within the same space, but they don't necessarily agree. Now, what I can do is, before I extrude, because you can see it's going at an angle here. Do you see that? It's looking at that curved surface, and that's the angle it's going to come out at. Before I extrude, you see this fun little icon up here? This is what allows us to switch between object space and world space. If I click that, now I'm operating on true, pure axes. And when I pull it out, it's nice and straight. All right? And in terms of that bit on the end, I could just grab those vertices and using my scale tool, scale them flat. And now I have exactly the same thing on my model, but I didn't have to use Booleans. Does that make sense? So sometimes you just got to think about the problem differently to come up with the same solution. Now, some of you guys might be thinking, okay, well, what's this whole world space, object space thing? What are you getting at with that? I mean, I like that button. I like what that is, but I don't understand. How many of you guys don't understand the world space, object space thing? Go ahead. You can admit it. Right. All right, well, let's talk about that, because I don't want to talk about something you get already. World space versus object space. They exist within the same space, but they are different. World space is the idea that we are in this world, right? We'll pretend we're in Maya right now. 3D space. This axis is what? Y. This is my Z. This is X, positive and negative for me. That's world space. I'm also an object in that space. This is Y, that's Z, these are X. Does that make sense? Same thing. That's when world space and object space agree. But that doesn't always have to be the case. Let's see. Y, Z, X, right? Pardon me. That lid wasn't on properly. All right. Where's my Y? That way. Where's my Z? That way. Where's my X? Does that make sense? But the world, that's not Y, right? For me, that's Y. Does that make sense? Object space and world space exist within the same space, but they don't necessarily have to agree. Does that make sense? Okay, extrude tool, you can switch it. Object and world. And I gotta get this lid fixed. That thing's heavy too. What the heck's going on in there? All right, does that make sense? World space object? Yeah, go ahead. You can do that because if you do this extrusion again and it's coming out like that and you're like, no, I want to use pure axes, you can switch to the move tool and pull it out. But let's see if it did it here or not. Do you see how my geometry is faceted? That happens when you switch to the move tool sometimes. Whereas if I extrude and I switch between object and world space, it remains smooth. Does that make sense? So again, that's not a horrible thing. I can fix that pretty easy by softening the normals in that area. But if I go between world and object, I don't have to worry about that. But that is a possibility. Yeah.
So when you're rotating and then you extrude and you want to make sure it comes out the same consistency, the best way to do it is with like object space.
It's situationally dependent. You really have to take a look at what am I getting. Sometimes there's a setting on the extrude tool for keep faces together. In some instances, you want the faces to extrude all as one. Sometimes you want them to be separate, so you can do that as well. So it is really situationally dependent. But what I typically do is, if I'm not getting what I want, all right, I got to change the setting because it's not looking like I want it to. It's a good question, though. Anybody else does that make sense? Okay, cool. What I want to see you guys do is play with the Booleans tools. Brian and I are going to walk around and see how you're doing. I want to see you try to start with this first one over here. And I want to see you do the Booleans union and then try to create decent edge flow for it. Try to connect those to each other. Then I want to see you do the one where you actually prep the geometry in advance and then fuse the two together. Does that make sense? And then I want to see you do the extrude on the back side of that sphere to match the Booleans that you do on the left-hand side of the sphere. All right, so Brian and I will walk around to see how you're doing and make sure it's all good in the hood. Ooh, and there's some updates available.
Oh,
Does that little blue circle with a nubby have a name?
You know, I don't think it does.
Right?
No, I don't think it has it. It just,
Trying to describe it. It's a blue circle with a normal sticking out.
yeah, you know what it looks like is kind of the power on symbol.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at a button, sometimes there's that circle with the little line on it.
Yeah, and you do have to zoom in closest to it.
Yep, yep. I don't think it has a name, but I'll look. I will see. There just might be one. I'm going to hop out real quick. I'll be right back. Yep.
What the heck? Material viewer.
Yeah, that's that one.
Oh, that's this thing.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get like the list of the materials.
that's the
again.
create.
Oh,
Choose create.
where- create.
That's the one.
Oh.
You're looking at the wrong one. Yep. No, you're in business now. Yep.
Yeah, now I know. Now I know. So how do I go about fixing it then?
Multicut.
Okay, so I'm using this.
Mm-hmm.
I go to this edge, like enter.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Right. And like I was saying, the Booleans do crazy things like that.
So this is being expected.
That is to be expected. That can happen. And that's where you go, well, I guess I can't use Booleans here.
Okay, then. So I guess.
Does that make sense? Exactly. Exactly.
It's a baloney movie.
All right. How many of you guys saw crazy stuff with your Booleans? Your geometry got all crazy, shaded black, and
No, I've set it up before.
yeah. Oh, you prepped it before? Yeah. But when you have to try to fix it after, you get a lot of that kind of result. So
I'd rather prep before fixing.
that's the gospel right there. Prep it before or don't use it. That's my suggestion. I'm not going to tell you how to use it, but that's what I would do. All right. Let's look at some more fun tools.
Thanks for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I think it's important. You can pretend it's not there. I don't think that's a good idea.
Thanks for the red pill.
I am a red pill guy. All right, let's talk about some more fun tools. The combine tool and the separate tool. And the reason I'm showing you guys the combine tool and the separate tool is I'm going to show you some other fun tools that work off of those combine and separate ideas. So I want to make sure you understand how they work, pluses and minuses. So let's take a look at combine and separate. Again, this is another fun little activity. So it is in our activity file folder. And again, any of these you feel like, wow, that didn't go so great, just don't save the file, open it up again, and we can look at it in the lab together or in the Google Hangout together so we can make sure that everybody's on board with that stuff. All right, let us go to, what did I name this one now? Combine and separate activity. Sometimes I'm more cryptic than others. All right, now in terms of combine and separate, sometimes you're trying to move objects around, and when you grab them all, they all move. But you start getting into weirdness when you try to rotate them. They all kind of do their own thing. Or if you scale them, then you get to see some really weird stuff going on. And what you would like to do is have the geometry kind of move together as one, behave as one, have Maya envision it as a single entity. Now, we've been doing grouping and hierarchy and stuff like that to get stuff to move. That is by far the better way to do it. But in some instances, in some of these other tools I'm going to show you in a minute, combine and separate is very important for this process. Combining is the idea that I can get Maya to think of this object as a single entity, even though it really is several separate ones. The way it works is you select the geometry in question that you want to combine, and under mesh, you will see combine. And literally what it does is Maya makes it so that no matter which one of these objects I select, the object behaves as a single object. So it moves now as one, it rotates now as one, and it scales now as one. None of those issues. Now, here's the problem. It's not actually one thing. It is several pieces of things. Does that make sense? I've got faces on the inside. This is moving and behaving like one, but this is not properly attaching things to each other. Does that make sense? The reason I show it to you is, again, it's going to help us out with some other tools down the road because they are still separate objects. Because I can literally go into mesh again, and this time select separate. And Maya will literally turn them back into the separate objects. They were never actually combined. Does that make sense? Not really. Because, again, weird stuff starts happening when you use that stuff. But basically what happened was I combined it. So Maya said, okay, it's not three things, it's one thing. Gotcha. And then I said, oh, no. take a look at these three objects, and wherever they are actually separate, please just separate them. So then I was like, okay, it's not one object, it's three objects. Oh shoot, but what's that one made of? Yellow. Because it didn't want it to not have a material. Does that make sense? Again, weird stuff starts happening when you use that combine like that. And that's why I say, yes, it makes things move together, but that's not the way you're supposed to use this tool. Does that make sense? Make sense? Okay, so that's what it does, but that's not how we use it best. How do we use it best? The way we use it best is when we're trying to attach two pieces of geometry to each other. This is where we're going to use the combine tool, because you cannot merge vertices of two separate objects. Maya will not allow you to do that. So what you have to do is tell Maya, oh no, these aren't two objects, it's one object, and I'd like to fuse the parts together. Does that make sense? This is how you use the combine tool. So if I've got these two objects and I want to attach them to each other, if you can imagine, I'll show you a little bit of demonstration here. I'm going to take this and attach it to that. Does that make sense? Now, if I straight up just attach these two things to each other, I'm going to have faces on the inside, right? You guys see those? All right, and we know that's non-manifold geometry, right? Because I got three faces sharing the same edge. I'm also looking at interior faces, so this is all bad. So what I want to do before I do that is I'm going to delete the face on the inside here and delete the face that's on the inside here. That way, when I attach these things, they will still be hollow. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, as another important aspect of this, the number of edges on this object has to be the same as the number of edges on that object, or it will not attach properly. Same issues as we were running into with the Booleans. You can kind of see why I put these tools all together. Similar issues and concerns. All right, so four edges on this side, 4 edges on this side, I can merge these together. So what I'm going to do is select one piece of geometry, hold shift and select the second piece of geometry. And here's where I'm going to go to mesh combine. So now, even though there's a space in between these two things, Maya views them as one. Does that make sense? One piece of geometry. So in terms of attaching them, you and I both know we can merge vertices, right? That's the tool for that. Now, in terms of moving the vertices so that they're together, I can move them to try to get them to where they're going to go. But sometimes it's difficult to line them up. It's hard to kind of get them to go where you want. So here's where I can use some really fun snapping tools in Maya. And these are tools that allow me to snap things together with precision. Now, if you look at your keyboard, the V key, as in Victor, is the key that activates snap to point. Vertices are points. So I can literally select a vertice, hold V, and then grab that vertice and I can snap it to any point I want. All right? So if I want to, I can take this vertice and V snap it to that corner over there. And all you have to do is select it, hold V, hold down your left mouse button and drag the vertice. And it will literally snap right on there. You can't miss. I mean, it might go to the wrong one. You just drag it to the right one. But it will snap it to a vertice. Make sense? Okay. Then we grab all of the vertices at the point where they're together, and then here's where we have to actually merge them. Because you'll notice if I select these vertices, they're not really connected. I still have to use my merge tool to make them connect. So I go to vertex mode, grab all my vertices, edit mesh, merge, and you remember the most important aspect of the merge tool is my threshold. Now, in terms of my threshold, do I want a big number or a small number, do you think? I want a small one because I only want the vertices that are right on top of each other to stick together. If my number is too big, when I merge them, I'm going to get a pinch in the middle. A That's not what I want. What I want to do, edit mesh merge, and I'm going to give myself a small number like 0.001 and merge them. And when I do the merge, if I select the vertice and I move it and both pieces of geometry move, then I attached it properly. That's where it should be. Does that make sense? That's how we use the combine tool when we're trying to combine pieces of geometry and then merge the vertices so they are physically attached. Now you might be wondering, well, why didn't you show us this before? Because that's kind of an interesting tool. Again, I would much rather you use the extrude tool to create complex changes in shape. Much better tool, much more effective, and that's the tool you really need to learn to use anyway. But this can be used if you need it. Does that make sense? If I show you this too soon, that's going to become a crutch. You're going to use this, and you're going to hide from the extrude tool, and you're not going to get good at it. Does that make sense? Okay, so you can combine and merge using that. All right, now Brian and I are going to take a quick walk around. I just want to see you guys do this, and then we'll do another really cool tool. Again, similar ideology behind it and similar uses. Delete the faces on either side, and then you have to combine them.
So this is as far as so I click on this object.
Hold shift.
Hold shift, click on this object.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when I try to do the vertices thing, I highlight here. I hit V.
Hold V.
Oh, yeah. Hold.
That is correct.
Then when you wait, why is it not doing
It will.
I think.
No, make sure you have your move tool.
Oh, good. Oh, this is the move.
Mm-hmm.
Click on that.
Hold V.
Oh, that's that is. You know what? I feel this.
It's easier with that by a long shot. Mm-hmm. Grab it in the middle.
Oh, okay. Why is my technology? What did I just do?
No, you just took with that one and snapped it over there. That's all.
Okay. But essentially, that's what you do. You have to hold down V in order to snap.
Hold down V. Yep. And with your left mouse button, drag the vertices.
And then essentially, that's what you do. You just connect every single.
Mm-hmm. You literally snap them together. That's right. You just snap them all, the fronts to the backs. There you go. You did it. Now just do that on the other four. Cool, cool. Good, good.
So how, I'm pressing the B key, but it's not doing that.
You have to have your move tool selected.
That one?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And then hold V and literally drag with the left mouse button and drag it to where you want it to go. Yes. You got to have them. There you go. Yep. Snapping points. How we doing? Good? Excellent. Terrific. Nice job. Good.
Excuse me.
Good. Properly connected. It's all under mesh.
Activity.
Oh, the activity file folder?
Yeah.
I'm not sure where that is. That's wherever you put it, but it's probably in your downloads.
Which one?
Oh, it's just a different layer. Open your channel box. One more to the right. Hide that layer and open the other one. Yep, 2 layers on the same file. Good, good. How you guys doing? Good? Killing it. Awesome. Good, good. Good. Yes, press B on your keyboard. Now B again. All right. I think you might have some symmetry function on. Double click on your move tool and hit reset. Upper right. There's one there. Yeah, there you go. Click off into space.
It's been like this for a while.
Let's do this. Let's reset your preferences and open the file again. Upper left-hand corner. Restore default. Save. All right, now open the file again. Okay. Hide that other layer. Yeah. All right, grab a vertice on one of them. Okay, that's good. Now combine them both, and let's see if it... Yeah, no, he'll have to get rid of that. I'm just trying to see if it's working at all. It looks like it's doing okay. All right, now hit Z and combine them for me. Select them both in object mode, mesh combine.
Oh.
Hold on, they're not both selected. Make sure it's in object mode. There you go. Combine. All right, now grab one vertice on one side. That's odd. I would hit Z. Let me see your combine options. No, I don't see anything in there. Just for giggles, hit under edit reset. All right. Interesting. All right. Have you restarted your laptop or Maya recently?
Yeah. It updated last night.
Okay, but I mean like this morning.
No.
Oh, try to restart your computer. I have a feeling it might be freaking out because it's just been on too long.
Okay, after we get all the vertices connected,
Then you merge them.
then
Merge tool. Merge the vertices. Yes.
Right. So select object, should I be in object mode when I'm trying to connect these?
Yeah, you have to combine them first and then you connect them. Yes. But if you go to the channel box, turn off this layer, the top one, click the V, and turn on the bottom one. There you go. Now you got your cubes. Does that make sense? Work with those guys.
Now, like, you should be in object mode.
Yep. Select them both and go to Mesh Combine. Hold Shift.
Like, I learned
There you go. Mesh Combine. There you go. All right, so now they're one object. So now you're going to go to vertex mode and try to snap the vertices using the V key. Grab a vertice, hold V, and snap it to the vertices on the other object. See how that works? Connect them to each other. Yes.
I'm not doing the V thing right. I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's hard to do with the trackpad, but if you hold down the V and grab that thing in the middle and try to move it, so hold V, grab the arrow thing in the middle. There you go.
Oh, okay. I was already dragging it and then.
Yes, that won't work. V first, then pull. All right. Very happy to see you writing stuff down.
Right. Try that.
Awesome, awesome. How are we doing over here? Good? Excellent. What's that? No, no, no. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Cool. Oh.
How do you do?
Yeah, yes, I will definitely do that. Yep. Please remind me if I don't. All right. So it looks like you guys are getting the hang of this. Again, this is a very handy tool for combining separate pieces of geometry. So if you're building something complex and again, you're trying to bring the pieces together, this is another thing that you can use in your arsenal of tools. Again, if it is at all possible to use the extrude tool to achieve these complex changes in shape, that's my recommendation. Go with that. But this is an alternative that you can use. Yes, exactly. That's the problem. Oh, I love that one. Everything is that now. So let's take a look at yet another super fun tool for connecting things to each other, the bridge tool. Now, the bridge tool is very cool because, again, it allows you to connect things to each other. It sort of creates geometry between things. So you don't really have to do that snapping thing to get things to attach to each other. We do combine things, though. But there's actually an added fun little feature that I'm going to show you of the bridge tool where you can actually modify the shape of the object somewhat after you've used the tool, just to kind of change its shape a little bit. It kind of makes it, it's still malleable. You can make adjustments to it, so it's kind of cool. But let's take a look at this bridge tool and see how that works. And again, this is another fun one. It is an activity file, so we're going to have to open up our, we call that guy, bridge activity. Over troubled water. And again, I got these nice rainbow colors here. Now, in terms of the bridge tool, again, key element here, I've got to combine so that Maya thinks of it as one thing. So I select both pieces. And I do mesh combine. Boop. All right, now let's say I'm trying to do that same thing. I'm trying to connect these two cubes to each other. I can select the face of one, shift select the face of the other, and then under edit mesh, bridge. And it literally connects the two pieces to each other. However, I can do some fun stuff with it. You'll notice that I've got this interactive dialog box here. And one of the things I can make an adjustment to is the divisions. And that's sort of the number of edges that are created between these two objects that I've just bridged between. Now you might wonder, well, what the heck do I need divisions in between for? Well, because we can use taper and change the shape of how they connect to each other. See that? I can make it breathe. And change the divisions, right? And then the next one is my taper. And again, obviously, the more divisions I have, the more smooth the transition between those when I do my tapering. Also, you'll see there's a really fun twist capacity in there, which I can literally put a little bit of a, put a little finesse twist on that thing and create, again, some interesting connections. I don't know, I suppose if you were modeling a drill bit or something, that might come in handy. But again, just some fun little things you can do connecting geometry to each other. And the cool thing about the bridge tool is you don't have to delete those interior faces. It actually gets rid of them for you. So you don't have to do that step where you're deleting. Now you might wonder, well, can I go from like a big object to a small object? Yes, you can. It does have to have the same number of edges for it to work properly, but you can go from big to small. You can grab this face, shift select that face, edit mesh bridge, and again, add some divisions to it, and that will smooth it up. And of course, I got my taper. Make it breathe. But by far, one of my favorite and most fun uses of the bridge tool, I will show you with these two guys here. Again, you have to combine them first. Boop. So Maya thinks of it as one thing. But what I'm going to do is grab the faces on the front of that guy, grab the faces on the front of that guy, and I run my bridge. But you'll notice that inside my bridge, there's this light blue line with some sort of offset pinkish purple dots. And you're wondering, what the heck is that. And what we've done is we've connected the two pieces of geometry, not well yet, but we've connected the two pieces of geometry, but we've also created another kind of geometry that we can manipulate to change the shape of what we've made. Now, what's in here, this thing, is called a NURBS curve. Can you guys say NURBS curve? NURBS curve. Now, NURBS curve, you might be wondering, what the N-U-R-B-S, NURBS. It's another kind of geometry. Like we can make bowls out of wood, metal, or plastic, right? We can make bowls out of polygons. We can also make bowls out of NURBS. NURBS stands for non-uniform rational B-spline, which is what happens when you let engineers name stuff. But basically, the idea of NURBS is the idea that on a polygon object between 2 points, we can only have a straight line, right? That's how polygons work. With NURBS objects between 2 points, there are infinite points. And as a result, infinite possibilities of shape change between those 2 points. It's just a different thought process. But when we're looking at this here, this NURBS curve, think of it as a line that you can draw and then literally pick it up. It's a line with physicality. Does that make sense? You can literally pick it up. And what's cool about this thing is I can run the bridge tool, and I'm going to increase the number of divisions. The reason it's so straight, the connection, is because I don't have many divisions, so it's not a very smooth connection. But if I increase my divisions, you'll notice I get a much smoother connection between the two. Yeah, don't act yet. Wait till you see what it can do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these little pinkish purple dots. Just like vertices change the shapes of polygons, control vertexes or control vertices change the shape of NURBS objects. So what I'm going to do is grab the control vertex, and again, I have to be over the curve, just like with the polygons. I got to be over the geometry to make it do its thing. Over the curve, left mouse button, control vertex. Grab that control vertex and activate my move tool. All right, so I have the curve, one of the components selected. Watch this. Well, I try not to have it overlap because that's still creating bad geometry. But I can keep moving those CVs to further augment the shape that I got when I bridged between those two pieces of geometry. So if I was making, say, a teapot handle, that might be a good way to do that. Does that make sense? Okay, always ideas. I'm always planting ideas. Yes? Sure. Yes. Have you restarted Maya recently? Because remember, just like you need sleep, your laptop needs sleep, and Maya needs sleep. So every once in a while, we got to give these guys a break and turn them off and turn them on again. Yeah, it's true. All right, so I selected the faces. Edit mesh bridge. And in terms of your bridge options, make sure you have this smooth path and curve as your option checked on. And that'll create that curve for you inside. So when I do it, boop. Again, it connects the geometry. There's not enough divisions to give me that nice, you know, stylish looking curve. So what I have to do is up my divisions. And I'm just going to grab this control vertex now. Well, no, I'll show you the divisions going up first to make it smooth, and then grab the CV, and then with my move tool, I can move it out of the way and change the shape. And of course, you don't want to have, you know, bad geometry, so be very careful about making faces overlap each other and all that kind of nuttiness. And something I've noticed is if you grab the the CV at the end, it kind of really messes up your geometry big time. So you want to make sure you're really kind of grabbing the ones more towards the middle to kind of change the shape. And it's just a little bit, not tremendous changes in shape. But you can see it does some pretty fun stuff.
I'm having trouble for some reason.
That's okay. That's why you're here.
Well, we're not together, we just go together.
Did you combine them first?
Yes.
Okay, because then you got to select the faces of the two parts, and then edit mesh bridge.
I did.
All right, I'll come take a look. But those are the steps. That's the way you got to do it. Combine it first, select the faces, then run the bridge. So Brian and I will walk around and see how you guys are doing with these guys. Again, this is a pretty fun tool. Does some really interesting stuff. Again, you know, can you use it for modeling anything? No. But there's a couple of instances where you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're like, shoot, how am I going to get that? Well, maybe one of these tools will make the difference. Specialty tool. Kind of like when you're playing pool and you get that bridge thing because the ball's too far towards the center of the table, and it makes life easier. You know, you don't use that thing all the time, just for really rough shots. All right, so we'll walk around and see how you guys are doing with this one.
I have a couple.
Yep.
First, contact, how to make it curved. And on top of that, like I noticed that you were able to like make it look as if it was like breathing.
Yes.
Which I was unable to perform, even though I kind of followed the same steps.
Mhm.
But I wanna first do this, master the curvature and all that.
Right. Okay. Well, you have to add more divisions. That's why it's very straight. You don't have enough divisions.
So I go to divisions, 7, because that's a good
Mhm.
number. And when I click,
Yeah. Just hit enter. All right.
so then I was going to curve, but it didn't curve.
Right, because it has to, the curve has to be in place before you do it, not after. You can't tell it, oh, by the way, stick a curve in there.
So I have to go back.
You have to go back.
So let's go back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, I think now
Select the faces in question.
Now we're gonna hit 7. This should use beautiful. Darn it. I hit curve type, then I went to divisions. I still have this. Do I have to extrude?
Nope, it's not an extrusion. You just use the bridge tool.
Oh no, yeah, that's what I did. Okay, so let's go to mesh, edit mesh bridge. And I bridged together. I went to curve type. I changed it from.
Yes, but you changed it after. That's the problem. You have to change the option before you do it.
Wait, I don't understand what it is.
I don't have. What the heck? Why is
Okay, why is that? Now that they're together, what do I do properly?
Well, but again, you got linear there. If you go to the options, hit Z for undo. Keep going back. There. Go to your edit mesh bridge and go to the options box. Smooth path and curve. That one. Now do it. Now increase your divisions.
Face is always flat, right? So it's only a straight line.
I'm trying to do. Like, what the hell? What? I don't understand. It's like a taper, but it's twisting it. I don't understand. And when I try to do the breathing.
I would restart it.
Wait, you're telling me that when you
I
go to
restart-
this
restarted?
spot
Mhm.
here,
Um,
then
close.
that's
Alright, open it back up.
because how to do that? I follow all the essential steps pretty much like for these options here, but I can only do the how do I open that? After when I click off the object.
Yes, it goes away. When you first create it, you have that box, but it's not there all the time.
So here you have your divisions, and then you.
Hit Z, go back. Keep going back. Keep going back. Keep going back. There. Now, go to Edit Mesh Bridge and open your options. Nope. Z. Go to Edit Mesh Bridge and go to the options.
Oh, this.
Yes. Set it to smooth curve and path. Now do it. Now hit apply. See?
Stuff.
Yeah, you got to increase your divisions. See? Then grab the curve, grab the CVs inside, and you can move them around. Oh, look at that. You're connecting them all together. It's a big rainbow caterpillar.
I guess.
Mm-hmm. I didn't say that it had to be done that way. I said that could be done that way.
Okay,
I'd rather you extruded everything because that's way easier.
I have like 2 dumb questions.
No dumb questions.
So I've discovered that you can't combine a circular face with a square face.
Yep, it's got to have the same number of
And
edges.
also, if I like try to select that face and combine it with the top face or like the bottom face, it doesn't work very well.
Mm-hmm.
So does it not let you do that?
Nope.
All right. I thought I was right.
Yeah, no, feel free to explore, but yeah, those things won't work.
I was wondering how to find like the control rooms.
It's easiest if you go inside the geometry because then you can see. You can press 4 or whatever to get so you can see through the polygons. And zoom in. There you go. You see the curve?
Yeah, I see the
Now hold down your right mouse button over it. Choose control vertex. It's just like polygons. Now back out until you see those purple dots. Yep. Undo it. Z. Z. There you go. Now go to Edit Mesh Bridge and go to the Options box. All right. Change it to Smooth Curve. Now do it. Now you can close that box. Up your divisions. Make sense? More divisions, more curvature.
Is this the control?
Nope, it's offset from the curve. If you zoom out a little bit. Oh, you haven't activated them. Get close. All right. And then hover your cursor over the curve and hold down the right mouse button. And choose Control Vertex. Now zoom out a little bit.
Oh, I see it.
You see him now?
Yeah, I see it.
Yep. Yes.
How did you combine it?
What's that?
How did you combine it?
You select 2 objects and go to Mesh Combine. You select the 2 pieces of geometry in object mode. And under Mesh, Combine. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes it's hard to see. If you hide your polygons for a second, go to Show and uncheck polygons. Go towards the top. Then the curve should still be in there if you activated the curve before you did it. I don't think you did.
I didn't.
No, I don't think so. Run the operation again.
Let me.
And just back it up a couple.
I had to change the direction.
Okay. Now go to Edit Mesh Bridge and go to the Options box.
The mouse. Sometimes really hard to click with.
There you go. Make sure you're set for Smooth Curve. Otherwise, the curve won't be there. You can't add it after the fact. So grab the faces with those settings and it'll work.
Couple vertex that you're
Oh, you just got to go inside because it's way in there. Keep going. Keep going. There you go. Now, do you see that? That's the curve. Yep. Hold down your right mouse button over it and choose Control Vertex.
Okay.
Now back out a little bit and you'll see the little pinkish purple dots.
Awesome.
Make sense? Yep. Yes.
I'll have to bridge all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to bridge them.
You have to combine them first.
Combine them.
Mesh combine.
Yeah.
Then select the faces.
And take a bridge.
Mm-hmm. See? Got to do all those steps.
Well, I think so. So you already know that.
I will help you find the
I can't
nerves.
find mine either.
I mean,
That's
I have
all right.
it set on there. It's just
Yeah,
it
no
went away
worries.
and I wanna-
No, you can go inside the object, and you'll actually see the curve.
Oh,
Do
I
you see it? And then if you
Oh.
hover your cursor over with the right mouse button and choose control vertex, and you back out a little bit, you'll see
Control
it.
vertex.
Oh, there they are.
Does that make
Okay,
sense?
So it is in
There
there.
it
Yeah.
is.
Very-
And
the
if-
same color.
They are. I know, the bastards.
So then I
Well,
click
because
it.
that would make life easy.
So then I
And then the other thing you could do if you had to is uncheck polygons so that those are not visible, like in your show menu. And then all that would be visible would be the curve.
So you just move it like this.
So if you go to polygons, up at towards the top.
Man, why is it not alphabetical?
Yeah, well, because that makes sense. We're not doing that.
Oh, okay. And then you have all these points inside of
That
it.
means all I can.
Yeah, you'd have to bring the polygons back so you can see them, but now if you move it, you'll see it changes the shape.
So you just move this and it'll change like.
It will.
When he's doing it.
Well, my snapping is very, I don't know, like, it's, you should change the threshold of the snapping. It's not as.
That's an interesting question. Can
Because
you
when
change?
you were connecting the birds on those two boxes,
Mm-hmm.
yours was you were able to go up and down between these two very easily.
Mhm.
But mine like automatically went right towards them. I thought maybe the threshold of that was very.
No, what I was doing though is I didn't let go of it. Like I would drag it and it was on the wrong one. I'm still holding down V and I'm still holding down the left mouse button. I just drag it to a different one. You have
I
to.
thought I was doing that, but it didn't.
Yeah. Well, don't be so gentle with it. Force it.
I always switch it back. Oh, there we go. Okay, just like.
Yes. Yes.
So.
What's up, dudes?
Okay, for some reason, like when trying to do the curve thing, I'm struggling to get that.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I go to faces, like this is what my faces are like.
Yeah, that's fine. You're not manipulating the faces. Well, you have to be inside the object though.
I am.
No, you're outside.
Well, I was earlier, and with, like when I was in there, it's just like I
Okay,
was
okay.
able to-
Now you're in there.
I was only able to grab one end.
Okay, but we don't grab the ends. If you remember, I said grabbing the ends yields not such a great result. So let's get more towards the middle. There you go. Now, hold your right mouse button over the curve. Right, there you go. Right mouse. Don't touch anything else. Right mouse. Control vertex. Now back out a little bit. Tumble. And you can see there's some CVs there. Grab them. And then using your move tool, move them. Does that make sense? Yes. Sure.
Let's say if I wanted to model like a water slide or something, would the bridge tool help with that? Or
Oh, sure it would.
it would?
Yeah. You could absolutely do that.
Oh, okay.
So what do you guys think? Are these tools pretty cool? They're pretty cool. They're very interesting. You're looking for a chance to use them, I know, because if you got a hammer, find a nail. That's the way that works. But again, these are not. Hey, I've got to model a dragon. I'm going to use the bridge tool. You're already modeling the dragon. You're using the extrude tool as much as possible, and you're just not getting a specific detail you need, or this would be faster. Does that make sense? They don't replace everything you know about modeling. They just augment it somewhat. These are sort of accessories. Does that make sense? The big three are your buddies. They're always your buddies. But these are other fun things too. Make sense? Okay. So again, there are some objects that are kind of challenging to build. But maybe this tool will help you with parts of a particular object. Alrighty? Cool. Any questions? Again, any exercise that didn't go particularly well, you know, come to the lab and let's do that exercise in there. Come to the Google Hangouts. Let's do that exercise in there because we can do, you know, a little slower. We can do a little bit more one-on-one. The lecture environment, we really don't have that big of an opportunity for that. So it's more helpful in the lab environment, but at least we can see you working at it. You can get a little bit of an idea of how it works and a little bit of touch, a little playtime with Maya. So you can get a little bit more comfortable. So when you get to the lab, you're not starting at 0. Yes?
So do you have the two objects combined, but then you delete a section of faces? Why do they remain as one object?
Because in Maya's mind, it is still one object. Because you could literally combine those two cubes and delete 5 out of 6 faces on one of the cubes. And there's only one face floating in space and a cube. And if you select one, Maya thinks of it as a single object. Then it would be a face and a cube. Because Maya looks at where the separation is, the physical separation, and it goes, okay, these are 2 things, not 1. Yes. And it will figure that out by the space. That's a good question. All right, go ahead.
When I tried to mess around with the curve, I couldn't really get to it.
Okay, well, in terms of being able to access the curve, you do have to be inside the polygon geometry to select it, because if you're outside, it's going to have you selecting polygon stuff. So you got to be completely inside the geometry to select it. Now, that being said, if you go to your show menu and uncheck polygons, so polygons are not visible in that window, all you will see is the curve. So that can make it easier for you. Does that make sense? Or you can use your isolate select or whatever and grab just the curve. So there's different ways to kind of make it easier to get just that. But if you've got stuff on top of each other, it's hard to grab the thing inside. That's definitely going to be the case. All righty. So let's take a quick look. Where are we at with time? Gosh, my day, I have none of it ever. All right. Let's take a look at our skill check. All right, now for your skill check for this assignment, and you guys are going to love this one, you are going to build either a snowman or a snow woman. You do have to sing the song from Frozen while you're doing it. If you want, I'll let you guys in on a little secret. This is just between you and me, and if you rat me out, I'm totally dropping everybody's grade.
Oh.
Marcus hates that song, and Sarah loves that song. So if you guys want to torture them in lab, and you can do it at home digitally too, it's just much harder. Get Sarah to sing "Do You Want to Build a Snowman?" because she loves that tune, and Marcus will freak out. I did not tell you that.
You should show
I did not tell. I should put a frowny face on him. So yeah, that's not going to happen. But anyway, what I want you to do is build a snowman or a snow woman. The design is entirely up to you. You can build anything you want, carte blanche, whatever you want. But you must use Boolean's operations to build the snowman or snow woman. You must use bridge operations to build the snowman, the snow woman. You must use the combine and separate. I don't care which of those you use, but you have to use at least one of them. Does that make sense? You don't have to use all of them. I want you to use at least one of those tools. Don't use the other stuff you know how to do. Use those. Hint, Booleans is the easiest. But you do have to fix the geometry. Let me show you some examples. Well, that just makes it easier. Prep before is the way to go, but most don't. You know what I mean? Most people are like, yeah, whatever, I'm just going to do it. Prep is definitely the way to go. But, you know, you can lead a horse to water. I cannot make them drink. I'd like to make them drink. Not going to happen. Let's see. Let's take a look at, oh, here we go. Documents, new lecture 7, skill check. All right, so here's an example snowman, and this is number 7, And you can see, obviously not everything has been attached, but what I'm looking for is even numbers of edges on all objects that are fused together, nicely and neatly connected, happy geometry. So make the crazy shapes, but make it good geometry. Does that make sense?
Making this scene from scratch.
That's right.
There's no
Yeah, there's no preset file for this. You just open up Maya and go. Use booleans, use bridges, whatever you want to use. We talked about a lot of fun tools today. Use any one you want. Yep, clean geometry. Here's another groovy example I got. This one's one of my favorites. Dun, 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 dun. It's like an evil villain rock star snowman. Pretty cool. This is pretty cool. You don't have to color it, but of course you know how to do that. So if you want to, feel free, but I'm not expecting you to color it. But I do want to see bridge. I want to see merging geometry together using combine and then merging the vertices, or I want to see booleans. Yes. That is not an activity. You just open up Maya and do it. I did not build a scene for you. It's not something you have to open from your skill check folder. You literally just launch Maya and build whatever the heck you want using the tools that I showed you. So, but that's a great question. There's no file in there. That's all you. All you. Anything else? Yeah. Is that working better now or no? Still not. Oh boy. All right. Well, we'll take a look and see if we can figure out where the issue is. I'm going to be optimistic. All right. Anything else for me? Questions? All right. That's it. And there's my buddies.
Do you want to build a snowman?
I didn't tell him any.
You don't really have a choice. You've got to build it anyway.
I'm going home.
I knew you would be excited, Marcus. You guys couldn't wait like 5 minutes? Yes. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, the light. I was blinded by the light. I was going to sing it. I'm like, nope, not going to do it. Too easy. Oh, oh, that reminds me. Let me show you.
Nice communist movement.
You like that?